Committee, or HUAC as it was called, began its investigation of communism in the motion picture industry. The committee, including Chairman J. Parnell Thomas and the young congressman from California, Richard M. Nixon, gained instant publicity for itself by calling up celebrities to testify and capitalizing on the public's never-ending fascination with Hollywood. First to be called before HUAC were well-known film stars, men like Robert Taylor, Ronald Reagan, Robert Montgomery. Men who would not only bring widespread publicity to the hearings, but would answer the committee's questions in a friendly manner.
You believe, as a prominent person in your field, that it would be wise for us for the Congress to pass legislation to outlaw the Communist Party in the United States?
I think it would be a good idea, although I don't know, I have never read Karl Marx, and I don't know the basis of communism beyond what I've picked up from hearsay. What I've heard, I don't like it, because it isn't on the level.
If I had my way about it, they'd all be sent back to Russia or some other unpleasant place.
I would move to the state of Texas if it ever came here, because I think the Texans would kill them on sight.
Many studio moguls, fearing a financial loss, were also eager to cooperate with the committee. But the most damaging testimony was the actual naming of names.
Do you recall the names of any of the actors in the Guild who participate in such activities?
Well, the one chap I'm thinking of currently is Mr. Howard De Silva. Always seems to have something to say at the wrong time. Miss Karen Morley also usually appears at the Guild meetings.
That's K-A-R-E-N-M-O-R-L-E-Y?
I believe so, yes.
After the big stars and the studio bosses made their appearance, a group of lesser-known characters took center stage. 7 writers, 2 directors, and 1 producer were called before HUAC. They were to be questioned about membership in the Communist Party, a party which, by the way, had always been legal in the United States. The men agreed to close ranks and challenge the committee's right to invade their constitutional guarantees of freedom of belief and freedom of expression. These were the Hollywood 10.
Mr. Malt, are you a member of the Communist Party? Next, you are going to ask what my religious beliefs are, and you are going to insist before various members of the industry that since you don't like my religious beliefs, I should not work in that industry.
In that period, being a communist was talked about in the same breath as being a murderer.
But all too soon, old disputes put aside during the war resurfaced. Even Hollywood was beset by problems as writers and studio technicians struggled to organize labor unions. Some politicians intent on crushing labor militancy and dismantling the New Deal used the Cold War and anti-communism as their springboard to power.
The communists have been, still are, and always will be a menace to freedom, to democratic ideals, to the worship of God, and to America's way of life.
This committee, under its mandate from the House of Representatives, has the responsibility of exposing and spotlighting subversive elements wherever they may exist. It is only to be expected that communists would strive desperately to gain entry to the motion picture industry, simply because the industry offers such a tremendous weapon for education and propaganda.
Communist Party. Or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party?
The question of communism is in no way related to this inquiry, which is an attempt to get control of the screen and to invade the basic rights of American citizens in all fields, citizens, whether they be Protestant or Methodist or Jewish.
John Howard Lawson was going to not answer, and Parnell Thomas knew it, so he started banging that gavel. And louder and louder and louder, and you could not hear Lawson speaking. You just couldn't hear it.
We're going to get the answer to that question if we have to stay here for a week.
For the Bill of Rights, which
I was chilled by this. I was absolutely chilled. I was in the chamber of my...
Humphrey Bogart. We sat in the committee room and heard it happen. We saw it. We said to ourselves, it can happen here. We saw American citizens denied the right to speak by elected representatives of the people. We saw police take citizens from the stand like criminals after they'd been refused the right to defend themselves. We saw the gavel of a committee chairman cutting off the words of free Americans. The sound of that gavel, Mr. Thomas, rings across America. Because every time your gavel struck, it hit the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States.
Forthwith discharge or suspend without compensation those in our employ, and we will not re-employ any of the 10 until such time as he is acquitted or has purged himself of contempt and declares under oath that he is not a communist.
In 1951, while the war raged on and the 10 were still in prison, HUAC began a second wave of hearings, both in Washington, D.C. and Hollywood. Over 100 people were called to testify. Like the 10, many refused to cooperate with the committee. Among this group were Agent George Wilner and screenwriter Michael Wilson. Ironically, Wilson's film, A Place in the Sun, had just become a hit at the box office and would win that year's Academy Award.
When Mike was called,
some of those called to testify did cooperate with the committee, talking about themselves and incriminating others. Writers like Martin Berkeley and Leo Townsend named literally hundreds of people.
Edward G. Robinson would fall in that category. 10 years ago or more, he started joining one communist front after another.
We knew in advance, in many cases, who was going to be called because it was pretty widely publicized. And normally, the stool pigeons would always make it a point of going to their best friends, the ones that they were going to inform on, and practically asking their permission and telling them in advance what they were going to do.
The John Dos Passos, deceased John Dos Passos, one of our best American writers.
Please.
John, J-O-H-N.
It was devastating for people to...
Back in America, J. Parnell Thomas had gone to prison for tax evasion, and Joseph McCarthy was the new champion of anti-communism. In Hollywood, a marked change had taken place in the content of motion pictures.